Hello again, Flosstube. It's me, Michelle, also known as the Chinook Crafter here on YouTube and on Instagram. So welcome back to my channel. I'm sorry that it's been such a long time since I filmed. I'll get right into that and why that happened. I just wanted to kind of give an overview of what I'm wanting to talk about today, because I know sometimes people like to skip ahead or go to parts they want to watch, or they just don't care. So it's good to just lay out your table of contents, as it were, before you start. I'm going to talk about my focus pieces and my ones that came up on my whip go wheel. I want to talk about stitch alongs. Then I want to talk about how I'm going to restructure my stitching plans. And then I want to talk about some other crafts. And then I want to talk about reading, because that's actually a segment I really enjoy, is seeing what other people have read, get some good recommendations, or, you know, can see if someone has the same taste as you and all that. And I forgot to mention, I'm going to start with a quick little life update and where I've been and what I've been doing. Okay, so without further ado, I'm going to get started. So, I don't know if you noticed, I had my baby. She came a week early, so that's kind of threw some of my plans and scheduling off base. I mean, I guess you should expect that with a baby, but I didn't think she'd be early. Her sister was a week late, so I was kind of thinking we'd be around the due date. So, there's that. The funny thing is, she was born on the 22nd. And on the 20th, I wanted to film, but we were too busy because my parents were moving on the 21st, and it was the Lunar New Year, so I just didn't have time for it. So I was like, okay, that's fine, we'll get this stuff done Saturday, but I gotta film first thing Sunday. Like, I want to get this off my plate and have a second video up before I have the baby. And I have the baby. I mean, it is what it is. So then I filmed on the 31st, because then I was, feeling good, had some help, and I was like, okay, sweet. And I did this really dumb thing where I framed everything, and then I had her with me because we are stuck like glue at this stage. And so I had her with me, and she started to fuss a little bit, so I scooched forward, and then you only saw this part of my face for an hour. And that was very frustrating when I went to edit, because it's very hard to find time sometimes to sit down and film, and all that time, and I'm holding projects like up here, you can't see anything, and I mean, I'm sure I have a beautiful voice to listen to for an hour, but it's, it wasn't as descriptive as it could have been for that to be the case. So that was that, and that was frustrating, and so just, trying to find the time around nap time and errands, and, when this one is cooperative, and so hopefully we're going to get this done. Yeah, so without that, so that is my life update. It's, very exciting, but it is what it is. It is what it is, and, I don't know, like, I'm more than willing to talk more about babies and birth stories and things like that, but message me, because I know not everyone's into that, and, I'm more than a parent. Obviously, we are attached, but that is that. Okay, so moving on, I'm going to talk about my focus pieces first. This one, it's the unnamed, I've been calling it Moon Girl. It doesn't have a name. It was a test stitch I was doing, and so I don't have like a design or anything to link you to, but I've just been mostly doing it for my own. So I've got the page finish here, and then I've got almost another page finish here, and it was exciting because I started moving to some more colors, all these lovely blues and grays, and so that was nice. It was a little bit more fiddly on the counting, just because I can't just, stitch black, but it's coming together, and I'm excited to see what it looks like. My second focus piece is Death to the Dictator by Crafty Yams on Instagram and Flosstube. She designed this as a fundraising piece for the Iran situation, which I spoke about in my last video, and I really recommend listening to Iranian women more about the issue and political situation, because it is like a 30-40 year situation that's been developing, and I would rather just direct that you speak to people that are more in tune to all the nuances and that. So I was making really good progress on this lioness, and I made a mistake on the hair. So I started stitching this in green right here, and then I realized from here to here, I'd actually added one extra stitch of black each row. So I got really frustrated. First I had to go through the whole pattern and like, okay, where did I make a mistake? So then I found it, saw how big it was. I was like, I need a break from this piece. You make a mistake counting, you get really frustrated, and it's like, well, now what do I do? Like, Sometimes you just roll with it, sometimes you have to unpick it, and I just didn't know what I wanted to do with this piece. I think I'm going to unpick it, because I thought about the logistics of just adding an extra row and just kind of stretching it all out, but I know I would forget about that and then make another counting mistake, and then I have to adapt again, and I'd rather just, well, it's little, go back and unpick it and fix my mistakes. I mean, this is one of my first times working on linen, so I'm bound to happen, and it's just kind of frustrating because it's one extra stitch, but I'm going to have to unpick like almost whole rows. Like, I might be able to save some of the stitches and like, tack them down again, but that is kind of annoying that I have to go back and do all that. But that's life. So now I've got my little pile. I was using my little Go wheel fairly well up until, obviously, but I am going to be restructuring that. So one of the first ones I had come up was pigeon coops. I'd rather be hiking. I love Pigeon Coop the Pigeon Coop as a designer. He's a local Canadian designer. I think he was in Toronto, but now he's in Ottawa. And he's such a kind soul, very helpful on Instagram. I've reached out a couple times with questions. So this is what I've got done. So I've got all the mountains outlined, and I started to fill in the greens, which is the bulk of the pattern, because then it's just like some back stitch up here and like some words, and some small motifs. So this is a nice quick one, and I've got a couple other kits of his that I believe will be quick ones, and it'll just be nice to finish them and feel accomplished, because it's very satisfying to finish a project. Like, I tend to work on bigger pieces because I like the bigger pieces, but it is very satisfying sometimes to just to sit for like a week or so and be like, oh look, I finished a project. It's not, a 2-month long, endeavor. Well, that's not going back in nicely. The second one that came up on the wheel is Wakanda Forever, which is by Hopper Bart on Instagram. And I did pull this an extra day because on the 1st of February was the release of Wakanda Forever on Disney Plus, so it just felt appropriate to work on that while watching. And this is what I got. So I finished off the white lettering up here, finished off a whole row of purple, actually 2 whole rows of purple, and started on the white letters, which was nice and easy to do while watching an action movie. Fantastic movie. I really enjoyed it. I like how it was, I mean, I'm not a huge Marvel fangirl. I will definitely say the Marvel Cinematic Universe has brought me more into it. And I did enjoy how this one could stand fairly separately from all the other ones, because it starts to get overwhelming when there's like all these like little bits and pieces that are from other movies that you have to know about. Because I mean, I care about some superheroes. I don't care about all of them. This one here is kind of embarrassing. It is the Pumpkin Colored Autumn, which is a free pattern from Owl Forest Embroidery. I got two and a half tiny motifs done on the day this came up. I am going to say the issue was the floss. Owl Forest Embroidery is based in Russia, so with the ongoing war and the sanctions for Russia, the floss just hasn't been available, and it's also kind of expensive. I worked with my local embroidery and cross-stitch supplier, and she helped me figure out some nice, beautiful conversions, which for the floss, and because that was going to be like my first time, and I really wanted to use the variegated, because if it's free pattern, I have some extra money I could spend on variegated floss. And so this one in particular I started off with was Chameleon's Gold Rush is the color. And I just found it like a little bit thicker than the DMC floss, and so I was having a little bit of a struggle threading it into my needle, it took me a lot longer to thread the needle, and obviously when you have like a toddler, and sometimes you only get like half an hour, and if you spend 10 minutes trying to thread a needle, you just don't get too far. That's on me though. I actually did have a really interesting conversation with Megan the Seattle Stitcher. She had talked about on one of her floss tubes about how she pulled all these different needles to try, and then she had like a little comparison. And I mentioned like I always tarnish needles, and like I have terrible luck with needles. Like I need to find different needles. I guess that's what it comes down to. However, my Michaels does not stock anything but the DMC ones, so at least they're cheap with the 30% off coupons, so even if I tarnish to a project, I can at least get more. I'll have to try some other ones once I've run through that stash, because I'm going to use all of them before I go on to another one. This one came up, I was intimidated by what I talked about. It was Orca Bay by the Pigeon Coop Designs, and this one actually went pretty well for me. I did a center start because he uses a lot of negative space, so there's a lot of negative space up here, like that's just the white Ada. So I first start in the top left and then work my way across, but not really possible to do with counting. So I had to do a center start. And so I center started, and so I did the big fin of the one orca, and I started to work on like the ocean waves. There are these beautiful geometric waves, and I think this is 3 different colors of blue. So it's a lot of color changes. It's geometric, repeating, so that's easy. But my goodness, lots of color changes. So I basically just picked one color, started up and went as far as I could, and then went back, and this is really interesting. So on his chart, so he has it finished in a round hoop, but he has a pattern to make it also as a square finish, so like it extends out a little bit here. So that's going to be really tricky when I get to the edges, because I think I like the round hoop better. And so I'm just going to have to really watch to see where I have to cut off my stitches, because he's got a pattern to be also square, so you can kind of cut it off where you need to, which I think is really innovative. And I guess the benefit too of me having to refilm this is he's just released 3 of his spring designs up for, well, I think they're for pre-order the other day, and there's some really beautiful pink and purpley flowers in there, and so good for him. Like, so, you know, go check him out again. He's got so many fantastic geometric patterns. The last one that came up was a year late from me starting. It is the Chronicles of Narnia Stitch Along by Sapphire Mountain Handcrafts. She's got a different name on Instagram, but that's the one I have. Sapphire Mountain Handcrafts. It was a limited edition release because she could only get so many licenses from the C.S. Lewis Foundation, I believe it was. And I really dislike showing patterns you can't get or hard to find, because it feels kind of like elitist in a way. Like, oh, look at this beautiful pattern. You can't have it because you didn't know about this hobby a year ago. Ooh, right? And it stinks. Like, I really dislike that part. But at the same time, I'm working on it, and hopefully if there's enough interest, you know, express to her that she can get more licenses or something from the foundation. I think that's the biggest problem working with like licensed properties, is you can only get so, you know, it's either something like Disney where, you know, they instead of working with designers, like, you know, they just come down on copyright, and that's a pity because there's so many wonderful Disney designers that they could have. You know, if they let people license their designs, it'd be fantastic. Or, you know, so many other like fandoms and things like that, right? So you're either, you know, you're doing it with, you know, intellectual property rights, or something like this where it's a beautiful limited edition, and that just really is upsetting to me. That, you know, so either like these designers get like shot down because they get caught, you know, and, you know, wrong or right, or, you know, you don't get to have something like that. But speaking about intellectual properties and things like that, and again, just because it is the hot topic right now, Harry Potter. Oh, man. Harry Potter has broken my heart. I think that is the easiest way to say it. It was a very important part of my childhood, and I can fully acknowledge that. But it is something I've had to write off in the last, gosh, I can't remember when she started making her horrible statements. But, you know, it's really disappointing when somebody you respect and admire turns out to be a terrible, terrible human being. And it's one thing when they're dead or they're like 100 years old, and you can be like, oh, well, you know, you can kind of justify it more, I guess, in like a terrible way, you know, like, oh, well, in their time frame they were, you know, or you can fully acknowledge they're a shit human being. Like, there's so many authors and creators in the past that you can, you know, go with, or, you know, or at least know that you're not contributing to their financially to furthering their views. But Harry Potter is like one of the big hard stops, knows. So it's been interesting to see that, especially because Harry Potter cross stitch was what actually introduced me to cross stitch. I didn't make it, but it was like, you know, on Etsy, and it was this beautiful Harry Potter like crest, and I was like, ooh, like that looks interesting. So I started to look at some cross stitch patterns, and it started to percolate in the back of my mind that this is something I'd be interested in doing. And yeah, so it's really terrible that, you know, that she continues to profit off of this and to continue to be a terrible human being, and to realize that some people have, you know, that moral line in the sand, right? And, like, you know, it is what it is. That's my soapbox for the day. You know, I think if supporting somebody who is doing shitty things is, you know, does not make you free of the blame. So, sorry. So, that was a tangent I didn't mean to go on. But I still stand by what I said, you know. If you support Harry Potter, if you're contributing to that, you are hurting people close to me. And I can't do that. Okay. Sorry, I had to take a little break there. I am back. So I talked about my whip go pieces and my focus pieces, and I'd like to talk about stitch alongs. So originally this is going to be posted on February 1st, and I talk about the Love Bug stitch along, which is my goal was to have this finished by the 14th. I'm not going to get there. My goal is by the end of the month, and then I can have it finished for next year as a Valentine's Day piece. It is gorgeous. The only issue I had is there's some pink stitching here and down here where it really blends into the material I chose, which was a risk I knew I was taking, but I really wanted to do the monochromatic, almost monochromatic, pink on pink hues. And I could have swapped that out for a different shade of pink. I am not that good sometimes at picking other colors, so I was like, you know what, I'm going to go with this as it's a texture detail, right? So you don't see it from a distance, but then when you're like at my house, looking at it, you'll be like, oh, I see some detail work that I didn't see before. It's like a little surprise, a little secret. The other thing that's been interesting to me, here, I'm just going to hold this up here, this is going to be my screenshot. There we go. What's interesting is to see how other people started. I know so a lot of people started with the praying mantis that's down here. I personally said I like to go left to right, so I went left to right, hit this little geometric shape, did that, and now I'm coming back here, and I don't know, to the praying mantis, and just, I like to work left to right in like motifs. And so yeah, it's been really fun to stitch. I really like this garnet shade a lot, actually. That's been like one of my favorites, that garnet color. And this is my first time working with a really repetitive motif one, and I'm really enjoying it. And I should mention I was lucky and I won the contest, one of the winners of the 1K followers from Starting Lupine, and so I got this pattern for free. And oh my goodness, there's so many she wants. She's got the new mushroom one, which is like going to be a companion piece to this. And then she's got all this mushroom lady and these celestial ladies, and then a werewolf and a vampire sampler I want to do. So I'm going to have to really get in there, mix it up a little bit. Okay, so that was my first stitch along that I'm working on. The other one I'm doing, it's the Natural World stitch along. It's by Pixie Pixel Stitch. I haven't started yet. I had an issue getting my floss. So, I've got very exciting fabric here. It's just a 28 count even weave, and it's from a stash because my parents bought a bunch of fabric in a garage sale for me over the summer. And I just looked at the size and I was like, oh, perfect. It's going to be the right size. It's getting used. So the issue was I picked out Sulky Blendables. It was going to be my varied floss of choice because I was like, okay, I just want to use the one color. I like how that looks. I don't want to be thinking about colors and shades. I just want to stitch and go. And so I picked out the Sulky Blendables. And sorry, it is Pine Palette. And it just took a while to cut down. I actually had to ask in my local cross-stitch group of anyone who was selling it, maybe there was a quilting shop or something, where can I find this, because online was ridiculous for shipping. So I got located somebody else who was selling it, and she's so sweet because of shipping in Canada is ridiculous. So to keep it on the spool, it was going to cost $25 to ship because it wouldn't fit in the standard letter mail. So she took it all off and wound it up for me and sent it to me as this nice little skein. So that was very sweet. It just did it because she had to order it and then do this, so it did take a little bit longer. So I haven't started yet. That is going to be something I start on soon, probably after the 14th, because I just want to see how far I can get with the love bugs first. The other stitch along I'm doing, it's a free one. It is through the World of Cross Stitching magazine. Diane Jones has a year-long cross stitch on it. It's a Life is Sweet, so each month there's like a little, so I have to fix my, oh gosh, I left all my needles in, so, here, sorry, I'm just pulling my needles out of the way. So each month there's a different dessert featured. So here, let me get this. I'm still on January, so I've just got the border. Yeah, and I thought it was a very, pardon the pun, very sweet little sampler style. And because she actually released the whole image first, so I was like, that looks really cute. That looks like a nice fun addition to the kitchen. I love desserts, and so I love the colors. It's all very pinks and greens, and so yeah, I thought that would be a nice one, and have just a bigger piece in my kitchen. It's a kitchen themed piece. And yeah, and like I said, it's through the World of Cross Stitch magazine, World of Cross Stitching. I get mine through the Libby app through my local library, so it is completely free, other than the fabric, which was, I think a 16 count I had in stash from that garage sale my parents raided, and I had most of the floss already, so that's been really nice. So I've just been working on that, and that was what I was working on the beginning of January on the weekends, just because that was the only stitch along I was currently able to participate in at the time, and so that's why I made up progress. and then I stopped doing it because it was at the bottom. It was in my bag because I worked on it the Saturday before I gave birth, so it was in my bag that never got unpacked. And so, like I said, I was sitting on the couch with my baby, and I said, "Can you bring me a cross stitch project?" I just took whatever was given to me because, I'm not going to complain. Like, I'm like, "Oh no, can you get me this other one?" Like, my mom doesn't know, my husband doesn't know, my dad doesn't know. Like, and even if I said, "Give me the one with the white fabric or the sparkly," like, I just took what was given to me and worked on that. And the last stitch along, I haven't done anything for it yet because I just got all my pieces. Tiny Modernist just released a Life is Magical, I think is what it's called. And it's this beautiful, like, crystals and cat and lunar phases and stitch along. And my biggest issue was she recommended this fabric. I can't remember what it was called, and I was trying to find it. And shipping is ridiculous to Canada. I'll say it again. When the shipping costs more than the fabric, I just have to look for alternatives. So I was looking, and the fabric she picked was a very nice light blue, and which looked good. But then on the teaser image, she had like this more like teal blue as the background, and I was like, you know what? I am really into that. So I was looking for the perfect teal blue, which ended up being Pacific Metallic Blue. Look at it, it's sparkly. It was a little bit expensive because this is a larger one, but this is my treat. This is my treat to myself, and it's very simple in the floss colors. And the first one just got released a couple days ago, but like I said, I'm focusing on Love Bug, and it releases every 2 months, so I'm going to work on that. Not as in as big of a rush. And I found this fabric from... It's one of the Flosstubers. Oh my gosh. I think it's one of two, and I can't remember who it was. And they were working on a Barber Ann design of the Dreaming Deer Girl, and I asked her on Instagram, because I was like, "Hey, that fabric, what is it? It's perfect for what I need." And she told me, and she's like, "Oh, it's the call for fabric for this kit." And I was like, I don't need it for that kit. I don't need it for that pattern. I need it for something else, because it's perfect. Because like when you're trying, yeah. And oh my gosh, it was either Camel Stitcher or Marjorie Makes. It's one of those two, and I'm so sorry. I can't remember who it is, and I'm going to have to go back and look and figure that out. So that's my stitching for now. My first time around, I had like a bunch of fabric to show you, but I've since cut it up into little pieces, and it's no longer as a nice little, like, ooh, here's what I'm working on spread. Now it's like, I got like 500 little squares. I'm trying to make my first project bag. And I decided to be complicated, because rather than, just using a nice, like a half yard or fat quarter, or, 2 coordinating fabrics and sewing them together, I had a charm pack, and I was like, ooh, I'm going to make a patchwork front for this. That'll be easy and fun. It's not easy and fun. I'll try and post up a little picture right here of what I'm using. It's the Firefly, Ruby Star size Firefly fabric. And because I got like a little charm pack, because I need like $20 extra to get free shipping. So like I told you, shipping, okay? It's a thing. It's a concern for me. So I got that, and I was kind of like, what do I do with the charm pack? I don't know. And then I was looking, and I saw these things to do with mini charm packs. So I was like, okay, well clearly I'm taking this charm pack and cutting it up into a mini charms, and then sewing them back together as a patchwork style. I did get all my fabric cut while I was visiting my parents. The issue is my parents moved, so half their stuff is still in Manitoba, and including my mom's bobbins. So she had the sewing machine and everything, but she didn't have bobbins. So I was like, well, it's okay. Everything's cut. Slowly but surely, I will get there with this. And it is what it is. I do want to get better at sewing, and I do want to make my own project bags. Like, there's tons of beautiful project bags on Etsy and such. It's just like, I like making things my own. Like, even if the corners aren't as perfect, or the zipper's like a little wonky, I like looking at it and being like, I made that, It gives me a sense of pride. Plus, I have a sewing machine, I have fabric. The only thing I don't have is time, and we're working on that. So speaking of that, other crafts, I have everything bought for a quilt. So I'm going to be working on that after I get this project bag and another project bag made, and then I will slowly be working on cutting it and piecing it together. My plan is, like I said, I'll probably be visiting my parents 2 times a month, and I think that will be something I follow along with me, because, that way we have more adults than children, and that means every adult gets a child, and I get the sewing machine. And that is kind of my plan. I do want to make at least 2 quilts this year. That's kind of the goal I'm putting out into the year. Maybe not have them finished because I don't really feel like hand quilting them or trying to do them on my machine, and to long arm is expensive, but to have everything finished up until the long arming stage, and then hopefully I can convince someone to either long arm them for me or buy me a long arming gift card or something, and that will be that's my goal. But yeah, so speaking of my other crafts and things like that, I need a little bit more flexibility in my cross-stitching plans. Oops, sorry. 1 sec. Okay, I am back after that interlude. So I was just talking about the other crafts, and just how I'm rescheduling my schedule on that. So I like having the whip go wheel. It's really good for me to cycle through projects I don't usually touch on. Problem is I was doing it too many times a week, and so it was breaking up my flow on my focus pieces. So I'm switching that around. I'm going to do the whip go wheel on Tuesdays and Thursdays. So then Monday, Wednesday, and Friday will be for my focus pieces. And then as I finish those, I'll probably either start another larger project or transition one of the whip go wheel ones there, just so I can start working that backlog, because I have so many projects, I have so many patterns and like things saved that I want to start, but it gets too overwhelming because I want to actually finish some pieces. So I'm going to work on that. And because I have plans for my birthday in May and for July, so I need to, get some room in there. So Saturday and Sunday I'm going to call my stitch along days. Those are the days I will focus on the pieces that are stitch alongs. There's other stitch alongs I want to start, so if I can get a good handle on what I have, I will then join. I can work with that one. Little parenthood shit here, And then because originally I had Sunday as my other craft days. What I'm going to do is I'm going to switch the evenings to be for my other crafts. I don't have good lighting in the evenings. That might change by the summertime, but I don't have good lighting. And there's options to fix that. Those options will not work for my stitching space at the moment, because I can't really put a better lamp there. If I get like a light box or something, my toddler is going to be obsessed with that and want that. So I think it's just better that I try and use the evenings either for like reading and relaxing, or like something like crochet, or maybe I'll learn how to knit finally, or like some of the other like fiber arts that I'm interested in that I can do with the direct light overhead, or just not as optimal bright light for my weak, tired, old lady eyes. Oh my goodness. Okay. So the last thing I want to talk about is reading. I am a huge reader. I love to read, audiobooks, whatever, it's all good. And actually my library did this really cool challenge. It's a read 110 hours, because it's the 110th anniversary, and it's running from December 15th to February 28th. They gave us this gorgeous, like very aesthetic scratch card. There's prizes already. As you can see, my toddler helped me with it. It is what it is. I haven't actually scratched anything off it yet because I was really liking how aesthetically beautiful it was, with like the moons and the stars and like the silver and black and purple, and then she ripped it, so then I was like, okay, that's fine, baby girl. That's fine. It was just very beautiful. But I need to start scratching it off. I am about halfway done it. I just, I find I just have to start listening to some more audiobooks while I'm stitching and things like that. And yeah. And so yeah, it's been really good. There's like tons of different challenges that you're supposed to do within it, like trying out a graphic novel, like talking about a book that you've read, reading something indigenous, moving on, the big ones. So I think that's really fun. So I do want to talk about the books I've read. I'm just going to do this really quick, because like I said, I'm a fairly fast reader, and I'm going to keep my opinions very short. I was having a conversation with somebody else on Flosstube. I'm terrible with names because I'm, and she's like, I find it really hard to talk about books unless you've read the book, because it's like, oh, like this big thing happened and it ruined my enjoyment, or, I feel like sometimes if I even say like, ooh, you say like, ooh, this character, and then the person's like, well, just you wait. And it's like, well, thanks for letting me know this character does something shitty, right? So I'm just going to keep it very brief, like if I liked it or if I didn't like it. And if you've read the book, please reach out to me and I will talk more about it. I love talking about books. I just don't want to spoil it. And I'm very, I can infer a lot from a statement, and so it's like I don't want to like give things away. So the first one I read was Anatomy, a Love Story, which was this like, this girl is trying to be a medical student, and it has to do with like the whole like, you know, body snatching as a subplot too. And because you know, like that back then, the only way to study anatomy was through corpses, and you could not really obtain corpses legally. So it was interesting in a vaguely not even steampunkish way, vaguely anachronistic English way. I just didn't really feel for the romantic subplot, and I might have liked it more as a teenager. The cover is gorgeous, though. The cover is amazing. I will probably not be following the sequels. Then I finished Black Powder War by Naomi Novik. I love most of her books, and this is her reinterpretation of the Napoleonic Wars if there were dragons. I will say I did enjoy the first two books, and I don't know if this is just a third book slump. You know, it happens in longer series, so I'm going to continue reading the fourth book, and I just, you know, I mean, it's really interesting to reimagine the Napoleonic Wars with dragons. Like, I would never have thought of that, and it is such an enjoyable read. I would definitely recommend the first two at least, and I'll continue going and see how I feel about that. I just finished also The Hacienda, which it has potential. I definitely into like the sort of gothic horror sort of mood at the moment, and it was interesting. You know, yeah. However, I think I'm just reading too many similar ones, because I also just read the Mexican Gothic. I'm reading the Death of Jane Lawrence right now, and I don't know if I'm just getting genred out on a very specific subplot. But beautiful writing. Yes, beautiful writing. It was average for me. I did read a really cute graphic novel called Battle Royale. And it's like just like a little teenage cooking competition, baking show, and it was really sweet and cute, fluffy, you know, nice palate cleanser. It was cute. I'd recommend it to teenagers, especially if you like everything interested in baking. Then I reread the Doubled Edge series by Mercedes Lackey. She is kind of a trash genre popcorn fiction for me, if that makes sense. I loved her books when I was a teenager, and there's something I still reread. They have not grown with me. It is definitely an 80s, 90s fantasy series, and her latest work has been a letdown in quality for me, but it's a comfort thing. It's just one of those authors I just will continually grab and read and just be like, okay, yes, good familiar world dipping in. The Doubled Edge series is a retelling of the Tudor history if elves were involved in the politics, which sounds so much cooler than it is. She gets a little bit bogged down in descriptions, and I think just kind of stuck with what historical figures can and can't do at the time. And yeah, so it's something I loved as a teenager, and then as an adult it doesn't quite scratch my Tudor itch. But I have some comfort. The first two books especially are more comfort. The second two I'm not as into, but I feel like once you start a series, you kind of have to finish it. Then I read two other books. One's called Unreconciled, and the other one's Seven Fallen Feathers. They are both memoirs / commentaries / investigations into the First Nations and residential schools and the impact and legacy of that in Canada. It is a very shameful part of our history, and I like to try and expose and understand that viewpoint more, especially, you know, and that's always been something I've tried to be conscious of. And so those ones are Seven Fallen Feathers follows seven different students in Ontario. It's not so much something I've been exposed to, just because where I live, we don't get a ton of students have to fly in for school, because we don't have as many remote First Nations communities in our province. I mean, they are definitely there, but if they were to come in, it would be to Edmonton rather than Calgary. So it is something I'm not as familiar with, and it's terrible because they don't have school systems in their communities. So these teenagers are literally have to take an airplane to go to a bigger city to go to school and high school, and they get stuck in boarding homes. But they're far away from home, they're far away from the communities, they're in a big city with loss of a support group, less supervision, and and it is a failing. And it's kind of well, duh, this is going to happen. teenagers are going to be teenagers, and it's terrible how we've let a whole group fall through the cracks because we don't have the adequate support systems. Even just by having a school in their community, or opportunity, of course, because you're told you have to go to school to have better opportunities. So they come to school for better opportunities, but they have like no support to actually have these opportunities, and it's awful. Like, and it's shameful. Like that is ultimately what it comes down to me. Is it's shameful how we can't do the bare minimum to support these kids in growing up into being adults. Like, it just makes me think of the privilege. I was able to go to special programs. I had tons of community and family support. I didn't have to travel to get these. Like, I didn't have to be separated. Or like, I did go on some special exchange programs, but they were short and temporary, and with tons of support from my parents, and the government actually even paid for me to do a 5-week French immersion trip. And I didn't have enough. I probably not enough supervision. I was like 19 when I went on that trip, and obviously we're legally adults. But oh man, a lot of the 18-year-olds went a little bit wild because it was their first time away from family, and that was just a 5-week trip. Like that wasn't like a whole school year. Yeah. So those are the books I've read recently. I have had more that I've read, and I will talk about next time. And on that note, we are done. Thank you for watching, and I hope to see you again in a couple weeks. Bye!